Welcome to The World Today. I'm Amarachi Ubani. We begin today with more Western countries condemning the plot and actual arrest of a Belarusian opposition journalist, Roman Protasevich, after a plane he was supposed to be traveling in was diverted to effect his arrest. Police took Protasevich away when the passengers disembarked. Witnesses said the activist was super scared and told passengers he would face the death penalty. Roman Protasevich had boarded a Ryanair flight which was forced to divert to Minsk in order for Belarus to detain him. The plane landed in the Lithuanian capital Vilnius, its original destination, late on Sunday. Authorities in Belarus scrambled a fighter jet and flak what turned out to be a false bomb alert to force the plane to land earlier, and then detained Protasevich, an opposition-minded journalist who was on board, drawing criticism from across Europe. In the dramatic scene, a Soviet-era MiG-29 fighter jet escorted the plane from Athens to Lithuania. The plane was suddenly diverted to Minsk, then took off again for Vilnius. Passengers aboard the plane described their ordeal.
Yeah, we were just waiting, but we didn't have any information, either from Ryanair nor from Minsk, but only when we got there. Well, before that, it was horrible, because we were kept for 3 hours without anything.
At one moment, we just change the direction of flight, and we go down and then to the left. After, let's say, 2.5 minutes, the captain of the crew said that we're going to land in Minsk without any reason why.
Ryanair Chief Executive Michael O'Leary said the decision to force the jet to land in Minsk and detain the journalist was a state-sponsored hijacking.
I think it's the first time it's happened to a European airline, but I mean, this was a case of state-sponsored, it was a state-sponsored hijack, it was state-sponsored piracy. But unfortunately, I can't say much about it because the EU authorities and NATO are dealing with it at the moment. We're debriefing the crews. Our crews did a phenomenal job to get that aircraft and almost all the passengers out of Minsk after 6 hours. But we have to do a detailed debrief today with the NATO and EU authorities.
The action has drawn much criticism from Europe, as said. Lithuanian President Gitanas Nausėda has called for sanctions against Belarus if the country does not release the activists. During a live broadcast, the president noted the shutdown of online Tut.by portal, which provided detailed coverage of street protests in 2020, and a raid on the premises of Belsat, a Poland-based TV news channel. He leads international condemnation for the diversion and arrest of the journalist. Germany has called for the immediate explanation, and Poland's Prime Minister called the action a reprehensible act of state terrorism. Russia, on the other hand, has accused the West of hypocrisy in its outraged response to the diversion. Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Maria Zakharova wrote on social media, "It is shocking that the West calls the incident in Belarusian airspace shocking." In the meantime, Protasevich's mother, Natalia Protasevich, says she's in a state of shock, having found out about her son's detention, but called her son a hero. Roman Protasevich worked for Poland-based online news service Nexta, which broadcast footage of mass protests against Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko last year via the Telegram Messenger app at a time when it was hard for foreign media to do so. He now works for a different Telegram channel called Belamova, and is wanted in Belarus on extremism charges and stands accused of organizing mass riots and of inciting social hatred, allegations he denies. It's been a while we saw her, but 75-year-old Myanmar leader Aung San Suu Kyi today appeared in court for the first time as she's been seen since February 1st coup. She was in the dock, sitting upright with her hands on her lap and wearing a surgical mask. Sitting next to her was the ousted President Win Myint and another defendant as two police officers stood behind them. Suu Kyi wished people good health in her meeting with her lawyers later on, and also made reference to her National League for Democracy party that could be dissolved soon. She said that she had had no access to newspapers during her detention and was only partially aware of what was happening outside, according to her legal team head, King Mongzo.
To the lawyers to tell the people that she cared for the people, and one thing she said is that her body grows out of the people, and wherever the people is, there must be, and there is necessarily be the body. The body may exist wherever the people is, she said.
A political crisis is brewing in Samoa, where New Zealand Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern says results of the election should be respected after Fiame Naomi Matafa's opposition party moved to form a new government in a ceremony held outside the locked doors of Parliament, while incumbent Prime Minister Tuelepa Sailele Melegoa refused to concede. Fiame, poised to become Samoa's first female Prime Minister, holds a Parliament majority through the Fatoula Samoa Utasi, FAST for short. The opposition passed the Shillits following the tightly contested April election in the Pacific Island nation. But while the country's top court ordered the Parliament convene today to swear in the elected members, which would give FAST a 26 to 25 seat majority, Samoa's head of state has suspended proceedings in a move supported by the incumbent. Italian authorities say they are investigating the cause of a cable car accident that happened on Sunday, killing 14 people. The car plunged 20 meters into the side of the Motorin mountain near Lake Maggiore in northern Italy. A rescue official said it appeared that a cable had snapped and an emergency brake failed. 13 people died at the scene, including a 2-year-old child. 2 other children were taken to hospital, where 1 later died. 5 members of an Israeli family were among the victims, and the surviving 5-year-old child, who is still in serious condition, is in hospital. She's also Israeli. Prosecutors in Milan said they had opened an investigation into involuntary homicide and negligence. Investigators said they'd also seized the operating company's technical and maintenance documentation. A lawyer for the company said maintenance and checks had been carried out regularly, but local media reports that the cables were not due to be replaced until 2029. Thousands of residents from the Democratic Republic of Congo who sought refuge in Rwanda are back home as lava flow stopped on the outskirts of the eastern city of Goma following the eruption of Mount Nyiragongo volcano. Right after Nyiragongo volcano, located not far from the DRC's border with Rwanda, burst into activity at around 7 p.m. local time on Saturday. The night sky of Goma, with a population of nearly 2 million, was illuminated with orange flames. Electricity supply to much of the city was also cut off. About 3,000 people from Goma crossed into Rwanda, and many of the residents fled, taking refuge. Others headed for villages in surrounding cities. The DRC's Ministry of Communications and Media said on Twitter that the lava flow came to a stop at around 4 p.m. local time on Sunday morning, at 4 a.m. local time on Sunday morning in Buhene, which marks the northeastern border of Goma. He says local residents are started returning to abandoned neighborhoods. WHO Director General Tedros Ghebreyesus says COVID-19 pandemic is being perpetuated by what he calls a scandalous inequity in vaccine distribution. He was addressing the agency's annual ministerial assembly where he gave the remark. They called on countries to donate vaccine doses to the COVAX mechanism to inoculate 10% of populations of all countries by the month of September and 30% by year end. He's called on vaccine manufacturers to give COVAX a first right of refusal on new volumes of vaccines, or to commit 50% of their volumes to COVAX this year.
That's almost 18 months into the defining health crisis of our age. The world remains in a very dangerous situation. As of today, more cases have been reported so far this year than in the whole of 2020. On current trends, the number of deaths will overtake last year's total within the next 3 weeks.
1 year since his murder, Americans today remember George Floyd once again as the George Floyd Justice in Policing Act, which was passed by the U.S. lower house last year, faces obstruction following Republican opposition in the House and Senate, making its passage through the Senate exceedingly unlikely for now. President Joe Biden urged Congress to pass a police reform bill in the name of George Floyd by the anniversary of his death on May 25th. But lawmakers now appear certain to miss that deadline as they remain at odds over key provisions of the bill, including the issue of so-called qualified immunity for police officers. Americans, however, choose to continue to remember the purpose of the protest, which began locally and snowballed into a major global event, reminding the world about the plight the dark-skinned people face. Channels Television's Washington correspondent Maria Bird joins us now. Maria, great to see you. What really is the obstruction to the George Floyd Justice in Policing Act?
This goes back to politics. We all know that the issue between policing in the U.S. has been a long-standing one. This is nothing that I think just started with the Black Lives Matter movement. We know this goes back histories. We can go back to Jim Crow. We can go all the way back to kind of the beginning when you look at the issues surrounding policing and African Americans, specifically men of color. And so when we talk about these issues, we're really looking at a long-standing structure that has been in place, and you're talking about completely disbanding that structure, which would then force the policing system to reinvent itself and to put in force measures that would allow for equal justice across the board. And when you talk about equal justice, many people think that that just means going to a courthouse and having a case called, as we've seen in the Chauvin trial, where he was called forth. That's not necessarily what we would consider equal justice. Equal justice is ensuring that the laws that are in place and the practices that are in place are ones that call for equality. And so when we look at this matter, this is one that is going to drastically change the framework and how policing is structured today. So when you look at Republicans and Democrats, those Republicans who believe in the system are going to be very hesitant to vote for this, to move this forward.
Yeah, and I think I understand that the Republicans have made a lot of pushback, to a lot of bills, especially regarding changes, in American system that works. But what could happen if, because they're likely to miss the deadline tomorrow, what then could happen if that happens?
You're exactly correct. It is highly likely that that deadline will be missed. It's an approaching of a holiday time for Congress, and so the negotiators are obviously going to be pushing forward. It can obviously be reintroduced. We know that the president has called for an as that this is passed, and he will be meeting with the family tomorrow. Likely you'll see negotiations that will alter and add to this bill and will allow for maybe some things that the GOP is looking for. But you're going to really see a huge question around is the chokehold issue, which the GOP is not very comfortable with that factor of the bill, and also definitely the no-knock warrants. That is definitely going to be a major area of contention, and you might see some pieces of this bill having to be removed if we see it get passed at all.
Maria, this bill is important, I understand, to many African Americans living in the United States. It will provide, some comfort, and some power to them, as they face the police on a daily basis. And understanding also that a lot of African Americans voted for President Biden in the last election. Can he intervene in this?
Well, we know that the president had over 20 executive orders just coming into the office of the presidency for the U.S. And so could there be additional executive orders put forth? There could be. We know that what President Biden prided himself on and continues to pride himself on is his ability to cross the aisle. And so the likelihood that we will see some sort of executive order, some sweeping mandate from the president as it relates to this is highly unlikely. What we might see is a sweeping mandate that will address a specific issue that has been brought forth through the Black Lives Matter movement, and specifically the George Floyd case, as we all remember watching him lie on the ground with the knee on the neck.
It's been 1 year since we saw, those pictures and got to see them again in court with the Derek Chauvin trial. Derek himself has been convicted on all charges. So what other gains have there been since the protest began, since the murder of George Floyd, apart from, the main man, the man who's convicted of murdering him, being facing justice? What other changes have happened in America since then?
The real changes are on the local level. So you're beginning to see local police departments, you're beginning to see local city councils, mayors, city governments to really take a stand and to make some changes internally at that local level. So those are where some of the changes are happening. But you're also beginning to see many of the individuals who have lost their lives at the hands of police, they're being brought forth. And so we're beginning to see many cases that are 2 years ago being brought forth. And so I think the precedents that this case has set. And so if there are other cases that are going to be brought forth, it will definitely bring another light to the issue. But I think that many people might be concerned because you're seeing even more of these cases come out. But the reality is, it's just that now the spotlight is on them, and so they can be addressed.
Maria, thanks again for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So U.S. actor Kevin Spacey is returning to Hollywood. The Oscar-winning star, who had largely disappeared from public view since being accused of sexual misconduct in 2017, will play a police detective in actor and director Franco Niero's movie. A film producer, Louis Niero, confirmed news of Spacey's involvement in the film to Variety, which will star Franco Niero and possibly feature his wife, actress Vanessa Redgrave. Spacey is one of Hollywood's biggest stars. He was dropped from TV show House of Cards and removed from the movie All the Money in the World after he was accused in 2017 of sexual misconduct by more than 20 men. Responding to the first accusation, Spacey said he could not remember the encounter actor Anthony Rapp described from 30 years ago, but he did apologize, saying that it would have been deeply inappropriate drunken behavior by him. Remember, he also came out as gay. Spacey denies all accusations of misconduct. We did report earlier that India has crossed a threshold for COVID-19 death tolls, coming out third on top of all the countries in the world after the United States and Brazil. As it passed 300,000 today, the country has recorded over 26 million cases of COVID-19 and is now the epicenter of the global pandemic.
India's daily death was at 4,454 in the last 24 hours, and the daily coronavirus infections rose by 222,315. The South Asian countries' total coronavirus cases are now at 26.75 million, while the total fatalities are 303,720 at the last count. According to the Health Ministry data, health experts say the actual number of fatalities could be several times higher, as many are not being reported as COVID-19 deaths. Meanwhile, in the United States, vaccination drive continues as the country has administered nearly 280 million doses of the COVID-19 vaccine as of Sunday. A week ago, the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention said people vaccinated against COVID-19 no longer need to wear a mask in most settings because the chance of them catching or transmitting the airborne coronavirus is so low, but it still advised face coverings to be worn in schools, medical settings, and public transit. Japan has opened its first mass inoculation centers as it races to vaccinate most of its elderly population against the virus before the start of the Olympics. The centers in Tokyo and Osaka will vaccinate thousands of people every day, giving a boost to Japan's sluggish inoculation drive as officials battle a fourth wave of infections.
Enjoy.
Finally, tourists from 10 non-EU countries deemed low risk have been allowed to arrive in Spain without having to present a negative PCR test after Spanish Prime Minister announced last week that they could do so from May 24. Britain, Spain's largest market for foreign tourists, is included on the list, as well as Australia, New Zealand, Japan and Israel, amongst others. Tourist magnet Spain will let people from anywhere in the world who are vaccinated against COVID-19 enter the country from June the 7th, hoping to galvanize a recovery in the devastated tourism sector.
And congratulations are in order for young assistant to Director General of the World Trade Organization, Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, as she backs a major award for COVID-19 community engagement and response in Howard County, Maryland, in the United States. Dr. Njideka Udochi's award, worth a whopping $65,000, comes barely 3 months after she was recognized as Maryland's Family Physician of the Year by the Maryland Academy of Family Physicians in the United States. Reacting to the latest feat, Dr. Njideka Udochi enthused that the award could not have come at a better time. She also noted the negative impact of the coronavirus pandemic on families, particularly people of color, whilst emphasizing the importance of child vaccination as one of the veritable ways to stem the scourge. She's pledged to use the $65,000 grant money to help increase access and engage children and families of BIPOC in vaccinations in the county. Pledging all that in, back to more good work. Thanks again for watching The World Today. I'm Amarachi Ubani.